Hey everyone, it's great to see you again. I'm delighted to welcome you to our final closing keynote of the day, a CISO's view on the future of product security. My name is Amir Kazemi. I'm the Director of Product Marketing, and I'll be your host for this discussion. To help me look into the crystal ball at what's coming into the future of product security as the world of product and software development evolves, I'm really pleased to welcome Brian Rust, who's the Deputy CISO of Worldpay, to our virtual stage. If you don't mind, Brian, why don't you go ahead and give us a quick introduction for the audience?
Hey everybody, name's Brian Rust. I'm Deputy CISO, as Amir said, of Product and Application Security at WorldPay. So I've got a fairly wide remit, but essentially I'm responsible for the commercial product security for WorldPay, not only from an AppSec perspective, but product security is response, vulnerability management, our assessments team from pen testing and internal external views.
Awesome. It's great to have you, Brian. So I wanted to start with the fundamentals here. From your perspective as Deputy CISO, how would you define the relationship and key distinctions between traditional application security and the emerging field of product security?
Yeah. So when I think of application security, I think about things that traditionally focus on the software side of it, of the vulnerabilities in the code itself. It's almost transactional in nature, right? You do a scan, whether it's done a static or dynamic scan, or you have a team that goes out and does some penetration testing or looking at configuration management, and then there's a result, right? It's a whack-a-mole game of, there's always new things coming in, and it's very transactional of, okay, something's been identified via a scan or a test, and now we got to go fix that, right? And then it's like, how do we go fix that? Things of that nature. The goal there is to always ensure that our applications are developed and maintained securely to prevent the unauthorized access of data, and things of that nature. When I think of product security, though, it's a broader discipline. Like, it's the life cycle of the product from the time of ideation, of someone has an idea that says, "Hey, I I see this problem out in industry. I think we should go develop something to address that need, and explore. Is there a commercial liability here?" But incorporating early into that cycle, to be able to have security step in, right, as early as it possible, to be a key stakeholder in that process as we build out. And then it goes throughout the thing. So it encompasses more than just your AppSec, your SDLC type things, but also you're looking at you're looking at holistically of where it fits in the supply chain, and the interactions between all the components that put together that impact the security posture of the product. Um, and you accomplish that by doing things like threat modeling and assessments. And it's really about making sure that your interaction is more than just with the CTO team that's doing the development, or the dev teams that are doing the development, but also spending time with your product team, spending time with your marketing teams, and understanding, like, holistically, what are the threats to your product and how we can work through those vulnerabilities. And you can address things sooner in the process, but also throughout the life cycle of the product, from ideation all the way through deployment and run, and and then even to the point where you're a product maybe in burn down, right? Like, you're engaged throughout the process.
Yep, I love that. So, like, I feel like many advocate for product security as a more proactive approach, and managing those security risks across the entire product ecosystem beyond just the application layer, like you mentioned, might offer a more robust security posture. Would you agree with that as well?
Uh, yeah, absolutely. Right. So looking to make sure that you're tied into the product's design, development, deployment, and maintenance stages. That way you're definitely integrated into the product life cycle, and from a
Yeah.
customer, like, approach too, right? Like, you've got to be tied in and understand what the customer need is and what the problem that you're trying to solve, and how it all fits in. It's not just a transactional nature of, hey, there's a CVSS or CWE that we need to go address. It is a more holistic view of, this is how we are going forward in addressing the things that are on, integrated from the outside. Um, it, at the end of the day, we're trying to stop escaping defects, right? And an escaping defect is a vulnerability that is out there in your code, whether it's defined, found by a bug bounty or through a scan or something of that nature. Um, we want to reduce escaping defects as much as possible because it's significantly cheaper to address those before they escape. As once they escape, it's significantly more expensive. Also, reputational risk, things of that nature fall into it. So, if you're embedded into each step of that life cycle, and you end up being proactive, right? Without calling it proactive, it's really just being a part of it, having a seat at the table, having input, being active in the process is it really allows you to and also pivot through and address quickly to new threats. And let me explain what I say when I address quickly to new threats. So at Worldpay, our information security team takes an attacker-centric view to how we view our world. Compliance focus is important, and there are certain compliance things that you have to do. Um, but at the end of the day, like we take an attacker view, so we take MITRE ATT&CK framework, right, and go through those scenarios on the kill chain to be able to say how are real life threat actors approaching this, right? In a previous world before I worked at WorldPay, when REvil came up, right, all of a sudden the board starts asking, well, how do we position against REvil? And the place where we're at, like we had mapped our control structure and against, MITRE ATT&CK, and we were able to very quickly say, hey, using the known TTPs, the tools, techniques, and procedures that the threat actor is using, we can very easily map to say, how do we stand up against this? And where are areas that we can lean into to fortify our defenses? And that's where you end up being proactive, right? Like, so you can do the same thing in your product security stack is you are taking an attacker-centric view that looks at what are the common methods and techniques that threat actors that are interested in us approaching our technology, approaching our products, and then building into a process of, okay, here's on the kill chain where we need to try to stop that and then go and address that. So it is more of a proactive approach from doing it that way and always having that attacker centric view. I think it really boils it down and it allows you to have a lot of those conversations, in a broader method of what does this mean to my organization?
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of touched on the life cycle pieces as well, and I wanted to hit on that point. So integrating security deeply into the SDLC is, known as kind of like the cornerstone of product security. What do you think? We talk about technology a lot, right? But what do you think are the key strategies and cultural shifts that are necessary to achieve effective, or even effectively within an organization?
Yeah. So the buzzword that everyone loves here is shift to left, right? And it's just we think of it as kind of a cycle that we need to get to the left of that process. Um, it really just means get in early, right? The earlier you I mean, there's studies out there that very clearly show that there are significant cost savings the earlier you just find a defect than compared to later, right? Um, you may not know about the defects until significantly later, right? Like, if you design a system that doesn't have RBAC, right, role based access controls, and then you go to market with that, and all of a sudden, your people get fished very simple things. Well, that was something you could have very easily prevented with an early spec sheet, right? Um,
Yeah.
and saying, hey, here are the things that we need to do and how to address those. Again, tying it back to MITRE ATT&CK and how, excuse me, and how attackers view us. Like that is an example of how getting early into the attack cycle or the understanding of the development cycle with what are the threats there around threat modeling and understanding your attackers and understanding things, setting really good secure coding standards. Um, you know, Everyone's leaning into code assistance right now, and I think that is another example of how can we discover things earlier, faster, better. And there's always been tools out there to do things like that, right? Like there's if you look at the development of things over time, um, it's always been about how do we, even with these AI assistants like Copilot and things like that, like it's how are we discovering flaws in our code, as soon as possible. How do we discover flaws in our code as our developers are writing the code, right? Like things of that nature is another example of how do we get it earlier? How do we get it designed faster? Understanding, what the flaws are that the same developers are making over and over is a great way that then you can also then target training directly at that development team to say, hey, you keep doing this, the AI keeps fixing it, let's stop doing that, right? Or you keep doing this, our code review keeps picking this up. How can we help you understand, why this is not best practice to go develop like this? It's all about that security first mindset when it comes to all your teams, right? Promoting the security awareness, you're training your developers, the best practices. And as I mentioned, automation tools are really great for discovering that and the checkpoints. And whether you're using a gated integrated pipeline or if you're doing a more waterfall method, at the end of the day, you still want to be able to define things that are potential problems as early as possible, and integrating that as early in that software development life cycle as you possibly can, right? All the way down to right there. Collaboration is important, right? Your product teams need to make sure that they're checking in with your development teams, making sure that they're integrated with the security teams compliance teams, so they can understand all the requirements, right? End of the day, a lot of this stuff is all about requirements gathering, right? And you've got security requirements, you've got compliance requirements, you've got other types of requirements out there. You can't miss that collaboration between the teams because, I don't know if any of the people in the audience have ever had this happen to them before. You get down to it, and the business is like, all right, we're going live on Friday, guys. And security is like, what? Like, hey, I just heard about this, and we're in our change advisory board, right? Like, this is not the time for security to find out about this stuff. And so that's another example of shifting left. Shifting left really means just shifting earlier. Right, left is just a direction on a spreadsheet that look nice for consultants. But that's what I'm trying to get there.
Yeah. No, those are some great points, right? Shift left, but also like the collaboration between security and development is so important, right? That culture within the organization. I wanted to switch gears into like more around the topic of like compliance. So compliance is often a driving force in security. How do you think embedding security into the product lifecycle helps organizations achieve and maintain the necessary regulatory compliance that we see today?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said earlier, compliance is just another set of requirements, right? As you're doing your requirements gathering for the build out of any software or product or process, right? It comes down to what are our requirements? What do we need to be doing here? Like who are my customers, right? If you're building products, compliance is one of your customers, and you need to understand the needs of your customer. If you're building something that is, your customer is going to be in Europe, guess what? You need GDPR. You need to understand what that means. Well, where's the provenance of my data, right? And how are we going to engineer this to make sure that it's easier to comply with this, right? Like if you build a solution that can only be housed in a single tenant, or excuse me, like understanding those compliance requirements helps drive your design of even down to like what database should we be selecting here, and how is our everything refer back, right? Like all of that really just helps you make good decisions. And in the day, you're collecting data, but data on itself is not information, right? You've got to take that data, process it down, and then you get information from that. And from that information are your requirements that you've written out, and then you go get acceptance of those requirements and say, yep, this is that get them to bless it, right? Like go to your compliance team and say, hey, we're going to do this. Am I getting you everything you need for PCI DSS? We've got version 4 just come out, right? Like just what effective, I believe in March this year, right? Like we've got different requirements, right? Like, are we doing all of our scanning that we need to be doing? Are you getting the vulnerability information you need to get? Um, that is built it all in, and um, I know it's basics, right? It's basic
Yeah.
blocking and tackling, and I know that like I feel like it's redundant with a lot of other stuff that people have heard, but it's the truth. You got to be really solid at the basic blocking and tackling, understand what the needs are of your customer, and understand who your customers are, right? Like if you're building an application, whether it be internally developed or externally things, different groups are your customers, and you got to understand your customers' needs.
Yep. Absolutely.
Excuse me, sorry about that. I did feel a little tickled.
It's okay. Um, I I wanted to ask you a little bit about kind of like the future of AppSec and product security here. So, looking ahead into the future, what would you say is your vision for the evolution of application and product security? Do you believe product security represents the kind of the more the inevitable future of how we secure software?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Or else I wouldn't be building the program the way I'm building it, right? Um,
Mhm.
I, application security, the AppSec stuff is an important component of what product security does, right? We're not going to get away from the transactional nature of I scanned a thing, I need to go fix a thing, right?
Yeah.
End of the day, though, it is very transactional, right? It is a um, it, it's not going out and getting requirements gathering, right? It is saying I'm using this version of code. Someone else compare that against what database out there, with the MVD, and tell me what issues that I need to go tell the team to go fix, right? Or hey, you've got cross-site scripting, go fix this, right? Like
Mhm.
the MITRE top 10 has essentially been the same for the last but since day one, right? Like if you look at the top
Mhm.
10, there's not been a lot of variation in what the things are. And you would think that if we were doing a good job as an industry, that some of those things would change. But
Mhm.
but they don't, because some of it's due to prevalence of how often those things are called and versus other things, right? And what people are looking for. Um, but I think part of it is that we've been so focused on just go fix the thing that's directly in front of me, and not done a good enough job of going and understanding the why. And I think product
Mhm.
security as a discipline itself seeks to understand why are we doing this? Like what how does this fit in? And what I look about threat modeling is that some people are like, oh, well, the data flow diagram is the most important thing to come out of the threat model or this and that. No, it's just getting the people in the room together, right? Like the
Mhm.
biggest advantage of threat modeling has always been you get the engineers in the room with the product people, with people that are, you know, running, if you're doing like, you know, physical things, like you just bring all the stakeholders together so you can have that conversation and understand what's going on. Very often the touch points are relegated to stand-ups and ceremonies and things like that, and it's just not enough high touch point. It's just not. And so what I'm doing here at Worldpay is I've got a team of product security leaders that are embedded to the development trains. So, and I tell my people, I say, guys, you're a highly technical relationship manager back to the business. So each of my release trains has or will have, a product security leader that is aligned to them. I am sick and tired of hearing developers tell me security doesn't understand my product. Right? Like it's a common thing I've heard throughout my career is, development teams say, you just don't understand what we're doing here. And if you did, you'd let us do all of these things.
Yeah.
And in the same token, sometimes the developers don't understand the why we're doing things from a security perspective and why that's important. So I've got a
Mhm.
group of people that are highly technical relationship managers. And I know that it's like, wait, you're taking a sales org type approach to this? Well, yeah, I kind of am, because we are providing a service back to the business to say, not a, let me send an email to the vulnerability management or the AppSec team to figure things out. If you've got a question,
Mhm.
you can go to your product security leader and say, hey, I don't know how to do this, or I need to get a pen test done. Can you help me understand and navigate that world? So instead of having the whole development team, all 3,000 developers at Worldpay know where to go to do a pen test, they just reached out to their person. They've got a person, right? They've got a
Mhm.
person that they can go to that is a hands-on, drop a message to and say, hey, can you help me with this, right? And
Yeah.
that's usually been tribal knowledge at most places anyways, right? Like if you want to get things done, who knows how to do this, or who do I ask to go? Well, I've got somebody that is responsible for doing the threat modeling in that product, that is in the code with those developers to truly understand from a security perspective.
Mhm.
But they're also there to help when it comes to a product security incident response, or things of that nature. And we really have a subject matter expert that is aligned to the trains. That is significantly different than the SecOps model of where there's a scan done. Here's a thing. The dev teams either know how to fix it, or if they don't know how to fix it, they can ask. Or most of the time, they're coming to the security team to say this is a false positive. And then you have to go into, well, why is it? Why do you think this is a false positive? And then you're getting up to speed on their code base and their deployment and architecture, things of that nature, to be able to say, oh, okay, I understand why you think this is a false positive now, right?
Mm.
I'm trying to shortcut that by having the product security teams directly aligned to the trains so we can understand their code base. So the product security leader knows when the scans are done and can assist with the let's clear up the false positives in this space and square that away. Um,
Yeah.
so you asked what my vision for the future is. Like, that's my vision for the future, right? People
Yeah.
that are embedded with the trains, that understand what the dev teams are doing, that understand as well as the code as well as the developers do. So we get rid of that security doesn't know what I'm doing mindset that
Yeah.
exists. And if you don't think it exists, it probably does, and they're just not telling you the truth.
Yep.
And that's okay, because guess what? We probably don't, right? Like there's a certain extent we probably don't know it, because no one's ever gonna, like, you can walk a mile in someone's shoes, but you still didn't walk 1,000 miles, right? Like it's different.
I mean, I love that. It sounds like collaboration is absolutely key. So, um, how does product security typically interface and build these strong relationships, ahead of time with engineering and DevOps teams? Like, how are you getting that done? In terms of the collaboration itself.
Yeah, so it comes down to, like, hey, let's go run a pilot program, right? Like, you go and you build the program with the dev team, right? You understand what their needs are. You go and talk to them and say, hey, what are your problems? How can we make this easier, better, faster for you? And generally they help you build it, right? Because they're they're invested in doing this. And so then as you go and you do an iterative development, just like they go out and do the same process, and you explain to them, this is what we're doing. We're looking to do iterative development on how to go and build this program. We want to do more than provide just the code review type things for you. um, what would that look like to you? Right. And you have that frank and open discussion with them, and then they help guide the building of that. And you build it, and you find a way to build a blueprint. And then it's just tailors itself to be able to, how do I rinse and repeat this with other groups?
Yep. Absolutely. Um, I have one more question for you here, Brian. So there's a growing sentiment that product security leaders are going to be the CISOs of tomorrow. Do you agree with this perspective? Like, what makes this role such a strong training ground for the future, security leadership?
Yeah. So the CISO role is evolving beyond just the security champion for the organization, right? We can see lots of elements of that in lots of different places. The reason why that a statement like what you said may or may not be true is because people that are in the product space are close to the core business of the revenue of the business, right? Like if you're a company that's building products that are being out there, so you're close to the core revenue. End of the day, the people who understand the business and understand business risk and business needs are going to be the people that are the CISOs of tomorrow. So if you're in a product led, product first organization, absolutely the people coming up to the product space are probably more better positioned for CISO roles in those types of organizations because they're closer to the revenue line and the product of what they're doing.
Yeah.
The CISOs of tomorrow have got to understand so much more from a not just how do I protect this, but also the business side of it is so very important, right? If you don't have that business acumen, like I just don't see how you're successful. Or it's just going to be significantly harder for you because you're going to have to be learning a lot of that on the fly, and that's okay. Like lots of us, if you go through the history of CISOs, a lot of people were kind of like, you know, pushed into the position because it needed to be exist, and as a profession, it's only 10, 15 years old, right? Like it's not like this is been around for a significantly long time, in comparison to some other C-suite type of roles. Um, but the product security, because they understand the business needs and they're tied to that, are why I think that they're well positioned. If being a CISO is something that is interesting to them and when they on their path.
Awesome. Yeah. Brian, well, we're going to have to wrap it up here. A huge thank you for your time today and sharing all your fantastic insights. I'll be handing it back over to Karina, who's going to be closing out the show for us.
Thank you for having me.